You're listening to the Lady Audio Radio Show. Lady Audio. Lady Audio. Lady Audio. Lady Audio. Vintage High Sounds.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Spooky Lady Audio Halloween Show. For this special show, we welcome Rebekkah Hilgraves and we welcome back Scott Lawlor. Rebekkah and Scott have collaborated on a number of pieces together, some of which we will be sampling throughout the interview. Be prepared as you play this show because you might get scared or grossed out. So, without further ado, welcome to the show, Rebekkah and Scott. How are you this lovely autumn evening?
Thank you very much. I'm giggling at your scared and grossed out comments. Yes, both of these stories are both gross and scary. So this is definitely not for the faint of heart. Thank you for having me on the show, by the way. I appreciate the invitation.
You're welcome.
And thanks for asking me to come back to do another show.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm glad to have you back, Scott. Okay, first question. Rebekkah, will you please tell us a little bit about your creative work history?
Oh gosh, where to begin? Well, I have been a radio broadcaster myself, off and on for over 3 decades now, and have also done some voiceover work, both commercial and character animation type voices. And I'm also a trained opera singer. I sang for 30 years and sing a lot of other stuff as well. I'm now a recording engineer and I run a little recording studio based in Los Angeles. I'm also a poet, and a storyteller, author type person. And I don't know when I sleep. Don't bother asking.
What's the name of your studio?
Rad House, Radhaus, Rad House. It's and it's a kind of a unique proposition. We're actually building a mobile studio now. So basically we can take 32 tracks to whatever your favorite venue is. And that's kind of a fun thing to do.
Wow. So what do you just set up your equipment in the, like, say an abandoned, like say if I owned an abandoned movie theater, you could just show up there and set up your equipment there?
Oh, damn, that would be so much fun. Yes. So basically most of the gear stays in the truck. The board and all of the processing equipment stays in the truck, but we have cables. And basically, if we can get the truck to within 100 feet of whatever the venue is, we can record just about anything. So, an old movie theater or your mom's basement or your favorite bar, whatever, concert hall, rehearsal studio, wherever. And we basically, as long as we can get the cable into the stage, then we're good.
Wow, that's really cool. I didn't know about that aspect. I just knew about your music, Rebekkah.
Mm-hmm. Well, this kind of was organically generated a few years ago. I did a live recording in downtown LA, and I really enjoyed it. I've always loved doing remote recordings. But one of the things that I've realized over the years, and I know everyone has been feeling this, is that there are no music budgets anymore. The major labels are tightening up and they've got like 3 artists between them, and then everyone else is essentially on their own and can't afford to record in big expensive studios anymore unless they're sponsored somehow. So what I thought was, well, I'd love to bring this experience out to people, but without all of the heavy overhead of a big brick and mortar studio. And so that's how this idea was born.
Oh, that's really great. I'm going to have to check out some of your stuff.
Thanks.
Yeah.
We don't have a whole lot yet because the mobile piece is still under construction, but in the meantime, we've produced a couple of things.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, I want to check it out for sure.
Thanks.
And Scott, if you could, as a refresher for our listeners, will you please tell us a little bit about your history with music?
Well, I'm an ambient artist. I live in North Texas, and I've always been involved with music to some degree. When I was a kid, I used to, use tape recorders and record players and make all these weird montages of different things, and used to play a little bit of piano and stuff like that. And after I graduated from college, I got my first synthesizer, and well, I wanted to be a novelist, actually. But then after I got the synth, I started just writing music and decided that I'd put sound together much better than words. So I started playing gigs around the Akron, Ohio area in the 90s. And then I took a break from music for about 15 years, partly because I couldn't figure out which keyboard I wanted to get next. And the accessibility factor was a big deal because so many of them have touch screens, and I obviously can't use those. And then I just sent a digitized copy of a cassette to Thomas Matthey of World Ghosts back in 2012, and he decided that he wanted to release it on his label. So that album came out in, I think it was January of 2013. And after that, I just started creating more and more music.
What's the name of that label again?
We're All Ghosts.
Oh, that's right. We Are All Ghosts. Yeah. I subscribe to their Bandcamp, and I've been getting all of the emails of when they release something new, and really good stuff on that label.
It's a great label. He's managed to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Cousin Silas has a lot of stuff on there. His Dronescape series is amazing.
Yeah, Thomas Matthey, who runs it, has really been very, very careful to collect some extremely high-quality music. It's only been around for a few years, but he really has a discerning ear, and there's some terrific stuff on there.
Yeah, I think that the same goes with electronica music as well, that doesn't have vocals and stuff. But it seems like with the drone music and also with electronica, those types of genres seem to generate a lot of people doing it. However, there are certain ones that will just pop out. And one of them, I feel, is Scott Lawlor's music, because it's not only like it isn't just someone there just playing a few notes and calling it drone music and putting a label on it and just like putting it out there. This is like real thought out pieces of music, and they're like, well, except for that one you did, Scott, where you said you just put a book on the keyboard or something and you just let it sit there all day.
Well, I was only for 3 hours because I was giving Cindy her medication after her foot surgery, and I had to do something with the time between the intervals of medication administration. So I decided and she was always talking about how I just put a brick on the keyboard anyway. So I just put my Eventide space pedal up there.
Yeah, there you go.
And let it play for like 3 hours. I would twiddle knobs here and there, play some notes.
Yeah.
And I'm going to release it. People that I've played it for, they like it. So I'm going to release it, and there's actually an extended version that I put together that'll probably come out much later.
Yeah,
but for that one album, I just put a brick on the keyboard.
Yeah, but yeah, I definitely agree that your music is, especially with the titles and how the music kind of matches the titles as well, and just thought put into it. It isn't just someone like just banging something out and just throwing it out there.
Well, thanks for the compliment.
A lot of the stuff that I listen to for meditation or when I'm doing yoga or something is either electronica or drone music. And my second... Go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say there's a funny misconception about drone music and electronic music that a lot of people seem to think is true. And it's interesting to hear you say that about the sort of discernment that's required for better quality music. Drone music isn't just a single note. I don't know if you've ever seen that Mystery Science Theater routine from years ago about the Yanni New Age lick.
No, I haven't.
A lot of people think that, it's just a matter of putting a brick on a keyboard. But but really good ambient music, drone music, ambient electronic music, any of those things that rely on keyboards and processors and whatnot. It's very easy to allow it to become simple, but the really good musicians are the ones that let it evolve and actually give you something interesting to float on over time, as opposed to just being sort of deadly dull background music. There is some sort of interesting evolution that happens. There's a through composition where you have a logical beginning, middle, and end, or some bits of interest in between that keep it from being just the same one note or one chord forever and ever, amen. And the really good practitioners understand this. And one of the reasons why this is important to recognize is that ambient music, it's defined by Brian Eno. And it's a great definition. It is equally as interesting as it is ignorable, as listenable as it is ignorable, which is to say that if you put it in the background, sure, it'll just run along behind you and you can not pay particular attention to it and it'll be okay. But if you listen to it, there's something fascinating happening in the good stuff where some movement happens or some change happens that kind of takes you by surprise if you're listening critically. And Scott, I think, is one of the finer practitioners of the very definition of ambient music. I've enjoyed working with him.
Oh, thanks.
You're welcome, Scott. Sorry, we keep going on and on about your music, but I've attempted to do some drone music, and I do not have the knack for it. I can do electronica kind of stuff. That stuff's okay. Most of my pieces ended up being about a minute to a minute and a half only, but I can do that and have little melodies and stuff. But when it comes to drone music and ambient type stuff, I don't know what it is. I don't have the knack for it. Although, like I said, it's one of the things I listen to almost daily because, I do my yoga or whatever, cleaning up the house or whatever. And most of the time when I'm doing that, it's, drone music or some kind of ambience in the background. If I have my record player set up, I like to play some old records that are, my old classical records and stuff, because that's what I like to listen to. But anyway, my next question I have for you guys is, how did you both meet and start collaborating?
Well,
go
ahead.
Go ahead. No, please go ahead, Scott.
Okay. I believe it happened after I read a story called The Cold Hard Facts of Freezing to Death, or Freezing, that was on the internet by a guy, I think his name is Peter Starkley, and it was a story about somebody who almost died from hypothermia. And after I read it, I thought it would be cool to put that to some ambient music. And so I don't remember the exact sequence of events. I may have written the drone first. And then I contacted Rebekkah because she's got a really good voice for voiceover material, and asked her if she would read the story for the track that I wanted to do. So she read the story, and I got it back, and then I went to work and put together the whole composition with all the different sound effects from freesound.org and everything else. And I remember when she played it on At Water's Edge, we were in the Stillstream chat room, and this was probably in February, had to be February, because it was pretty cold out here. And one of the listeners made a comment. He said, this thing is making me so cold, I have to wait till the summer to listen to it.
That was I remember who said that, actually. That was
Joe McMahon.
Joe McMahon said that. High praise indeed.
Yep. Yeah.
Wow.
And I remember we had talked about the idea of trying to get that into the hands of Stephen Hill at Hearts of Space. I remember we had talked about that a little bit. But I don't know if I don't think we have done that yet.
We haven't done that. I seem to recall at one point he said he didn't necessarily want story-like music, stuff with vocals in it, or storytelling music like that. But I will be happy to check with him again.
So how did you know to contact Rebekkah, Scott?
Well, I just contacted her because I've heard her read before, and it was really good, and I just thought it would make a good fit for the project. And so that was the first one that I contacted you about, I believe, if I remember
That's right. Yep, that's right.
And then I contacted her about the madness that lurks within.
Yeah.
And that one I just went over the top with the effects and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was creepy. I actually, I didn't know at first that it was fiction, and so it really just freaked me out. I had so much trouble by the time we got to the end that I was crying and had to stop recording a couple of times because it was just so creepy and awful. And then I found out, no, this is just fiction. It's okay.
Yeah, in the meantime, you had sent me an email and you said, I don't think I can do any more of these or something like that.
Yeah, it was really distressing.
Yeah.
But then, once I found out it was fiction, I'm like, okay, bring it on. I want more.
Yeah.
But at the time, I think what you're wondering, Clara, or maybe I don't want to put words in your mouth, but how Scott and I connected in the first place was through the radio station Stillstream.fm. I used to be an announcer on it, and Scott was too for a time, actually quite a bit of time. And so we knew each other through the station, and we were aware of each other's work sort of in and out of that station. And our respective shows, and just, sort of developed a mutual respect for each other's art.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah, another question I had, well, now that, Rebekkah, you have already said that you did start getting weirded out towards the end of that story, but for the madness that lurks within, I wanted to ask Scott if he ever felt sick when he was recording some of those disgusting sounds.
Absolutely not.
Oh, God.
Nope, no way. I just didn't feel that way at all. I was like, man, this is just a cool sound effect to put it right here or wherever it was. So I would just find all these different things from free sound, and I'm trying to think if I mangled it. I mangled some of them, like the screaming and stuff. I moved that from channel to channel and put a ton of reverb on it and did some other stuff like that.
The chamber was flushed of the stimulant gas and filled with fresh air, and immediately voices from the microphones began to object. 3 different voices began begging, as if pleading for the life of loved ones, to turn the gas back on. The chamber was opened and soldiers sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. Four of the 5 subjects were still alive, although no one could rightly call the state that any of them were in life. The food rations past day 5 had not been so much as touched. There were chunks of meat from the dead test subject's thighs and chest, stuffed into the drain in the center of the chamber, blocking the drain and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. Precisely how much of the water on the floor was actually blood was never determined. All 4 surviving test subjects also had large portions of muscle and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bone on their fingertips indicated that the wounds were inflicted by hand, not with teeth, as the researchers initially thought.
But no, I never felt any sense of morbidity or anything when I would put these together, because they were pretty fun for me.
That's so...
But I'm a pretty morbid person anyway.
Yeah, I guess so. Because when I was listening to it, I guess it's different if you're recording it and than if you're listening to it. But while I was listening to it, I started getting sick towards the end, or I guess it's maybe 2/3 of the way where the bones start breaking and stuff. I was listening to the sound effects along with the very, very descriptive narration. I was just, I almost had to turn it off, but I didn't because I wanted to listen to the entire thing.
Oh, you poor thing. Yeah, that was kind of how I felt. It was sickening, and it was just really disturbing.
Yeah.
All of that gruesomeness. And it was worse when I thought it was, a true story. So yeah, no, I sympathize.
Yeah. So how many pieces have you guys worked on together?
We have worked on 4 different pieces. We worked on those 2. We worked on one called No Heaven, No Forgiveness. That's the shortest one. That clocks in around 20 minutes, which doesn't use any sounds from Freesound. And then the last one we released was The Fog, which was released last Halloween.
Okay. So what was the inspiration for The Fog?
Well, that was another story that I found on the internet. And for all of these, I just find these stories, whether they're from creepypasta or different places on the internet, and I read them.
On deck, the night was unnaturally clear and cold, and the bright of the stars burned in the frosty air. Around us in every direction, just a few hundred yards away, the fog and clouds whirled as if held at bay by our presence. The captain was at the railing, leaning over along with the men on watch. I approached him, suddenly desperate and panicked to know what was happening. When I saw it, the light flooding up from beneath us. The sea was flat like the surface of a mirror. The water was black, reflecting the pale pinpricks of the stars. But beneath the surface, something glowed with a cold light. Pulsating shapes of violet, green, and deep cobalt blue shone from beneath. They flowed and merged and shimmered silently, deep below the glassy sea. We stared, 24 men and women, struck dumb and horrified by the sight. There was a sense of scale that emerged from the fluid movement of the lights. They seemed to be many fathoms beneath us, which would make them terribly large and impossibly fast. There were no solid shapes, and no disturbance of the water, just a deep field of liquid, flowing light.
And I just have this idea that it would go really good with some of the music that I could create. And after The Fog, I haven't really found any more that I found a couple more, but after sending them to Rebekkah, we talked about it, and we decided that they really weren't as good. Things like that. And I've been involved with so many other things anyway that I just haven't taken the opportunity to go look for more things, but I think I need to do that because I'm going to do more stuff like this.
Bring it on, baby.
You guys do really great work together.
Thank you.
I haven't had a chance to listen to No Heaven, No Forgiveness yet, but what is that piece about?
It's a piece about some scientists who wanted to do an experiment, and they thought that a person could have contact with God merely by thought, if I remember correct. Gosh, it's been a long time since we did that one. So they surgically cut all his nerves so he didn't have any senses left. It was just a weird, really weird, bizarre little story. Gosh, that was on. I know that was on creepypasta, but I can't remember the exact name of the story. But it's easy enough to Google. But yeah, it was a strange little story for sure.
In 1983, a team of deeply pious scientists conducted a radical experiment in an undisclosed facility. The scientists had theorized that a human without access to any senses or ways to perceive stimuli would be able to perceive the presence of God. They believed that the five senses clouded our awareness of eternity, and without them, a human could actually establish contact with God by thought. An elderly man who claimed to have nothing left to live for was the only test subject to volunteer. To purge him of all his senses, the scientists performed a complex operation in which every sensory nerve connection to the brain was surgically severed. Although the test subject retained full muscular function, he could not see, hear, taste, smell, or feel. With no possible way to communicate with or even sense the outside world, he was alone with his thoughts.
Yeah, I forget what the title was, but yeah, that was an odd one. Total sensory deprivation to the point where the person had to just live within himself the whole time, and but apparently what they dig up isn't God at all.
Yeah, it was really bizarre.
It was plenty creepy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a good one. Yeah. Yeah, and going back to Scott's comment about the quality of the stories that we've found, creepypasta is an interesting place. It's kind of like a Wikipedia or a Wikia, but for, short stories and people who just like to tell icky stories. And as you might imagine with a public forum like that, some of them are really great and some of them not so much. And
Yeah.
I wanted to, one of the reasons that I had kind of put my foot down at one point about the quality of the narrative itself is because the things that we had done so far were so good and the stories were so well written that I wanted to kind of hold us to a standard. And anything less would be, I think, disappointing for us to work with, but also disappointing, not as interesting for the audience. So we've sort of limited our scope a little bit, but we're waiting for those really good, well-crafted stories that kind of leave you on the edge of your seat and aren't predictable. I mean, I think one of the beautiful things about these stories was that none of them were really predictable. They were creepy and awful, but there were some twists that were unexpected, and that was part of what made it fun.
No, I just forgot what I was going to say. That's all right. It happens all the time. It was something about, oh yeah, I remember what it was now. So when you guys want to start, say you find another story tomorrow and you want to start collaborating again on another piece, what are the logistics that you go through to put it together?
Well, I'll find the story and I'll read it and I'll think about it for a couple of days and decide if I think I can do something with it. And then I'll send it to Rebekkah and then she'll read it. And then she'll send me back the WAV file of the narration. And then I'll start working on the drone and pasting in the narrative. But I don't paste the narrative in one big block. I paste in a couple of paragraphs here and there, and then put in some sound effects, and just space things out a good bit. Like the recollecting the snow. I think the narrative for that was about 35 minutes in total, but the whole piece is about an hour and 4 minutes. So there's a good bit of space where different sound effects are going on and things like that. And it takes me, how long does it take me to do those? It can take me a couple of days to get those done.
A couple of days.
Yeah. Although I think, though, heaven no forgiveness, I got done in like a day or a couple of hours or something crazy because it was so short.
See, that amazes me that you can just crank that stuff out like that so quickly. I would have been at it for months and still not been happy with it.
Well, somebody asked me, how do I put out so much material? And I said, I drink more coffee than anyone else in the house, and I sleep less than everyone else.
Oh, yeah, I know some other musicians like you.
Yeah, like Wings of an Angel.
Yeah. And Hare does the same thing. He drinks Red Bull and just works until he can't see straight.
Yeah.
I just quit caffeine for a little while. I have a song that we're going to be doing soon called Indigo, and it has these little fluctuations that I need to do, kind of falsetto, and I can't do those little tricks with my voice if I have too much caffeine or any caffeine. So sometimes when there's a recording coming up, I have to wean off the caffeine, and I wean off because I do not want to have that horrible, horrible headache. Mm-hmm. So I'll go to 1 cup of coffee, and then I'll go to 2 cups of black tea. Then I'll go to 1 cup of black tea and 1 cup of green tea. And then I'll go to 2 cups of green tea down to 1 cup of green tea. And then I don't get the headache. So
that is very wise. That's a really good approach. I should try that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the caffeine just ruins my voice when it comes to having more, detail. If there's a vocal part that needs a lot more detail and I'm going to be a lot more upfront in the track, then that's when I take those steps to, make sure that I do my vocal workouts and all that kind of stuff. So, But
it's a funny discipline, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. So, I wanted to talk about plagues for a little bit, Scott.
Okay.
And then after that, I wanted to talk about whichever piece you would like to talk about, Rebekkah, that you do besides your collaborations with Scott. But Scott, in Plagues, I wanted to talk about what was the inspiration for that album, and when is it going to be released?
Well, the inspiration was Exodus. Oh gosh, I don't remember the chapters, but where the plagues of Egypt, when the Israelites are trying to escape from when they're trying to escape from Egypt, and God gave all these plagues to the Egyptians and everything. But yeah, it's going to be released on October 31st.
Cool.
And I just decided that it would be cool to do an ambient interpretation of that whole setup. So I, went back out to Freesound, got a bunch of stuff, and put it together. Actually, I put it together, I think it was a couple of years ago. I was just waiting for the right time to release it because I had other Halloween albums that I had already scheduled. And
then for the Agony of Boils, they don't really sound like screaming noises, but it does too. So I was wondering what that noise was that kind of sounds like screaming almost.
I think it is somebody screaming, but I think I processed it a good bit. added some reverb to it, and I think I have it going on different channels and things like that. Yeah, I think it's someone screaming, actually.
Wow. Yeah, that one was, when that one came up, because I listened to the whole thing, and when that one came up, it was really disturbing.
Really disturbing.
Yeah. Yeah, that one was disturbing. I think the whole thing, it's just a really dark, part of the Bible, and to put to music, it hits that other level, So.
Yeah. I sent it to a friend of mine, and he said, this thing isn't dark enough. It needs to be darker. I said, okay, let me work on that. And so I added some more. I can't remember which sections he said were dark, and he said that it needed some interludes, because one of my inspirations for the album also was an album called 3 Days of Darkness by, who wrote that album? 3 Days of Darkness. Gosh, I got it over here. I can
look it up real quick.
Infallen.
Okay.
That's right. Infallen wrote that album, and I believe he's a dude who lives out here not far from me over in I think he lives in Arlington or something like that. But yeah, after I heard 3 Days of Darkness, I was like, man, I can do something like that with Plagues. And so I did that. And when I sent it to a friend of mine, he's like, you need some interludes, like the 3 Days of Darkness album has. I said, okay, so I put some little interludes, and he said, then you need a prologue, because even 3 Days of Darkness has a prologue. So I put a prologue in. The prologue was basically just reversing one of the interludes. So I took a couple of shortcuts, I suppose, but it still worked out okay.
Yeah. I think it sounds great. To me, that album is a little disturbing. The same with The Madness That Lurks Within. Both of those were just really disturbing for me. We'll see how No Heaven and No Forgiveness, what that does to my brain. But
yeah.
But is there anything else that you wanted to share about that album?
I don't think so. It was a pretty simple concept to put together. I mean, well, not simple, but there isn't really too much else to say about it in terms of the explanation of everything, except I mangled some of the sounds, like, the sound of blood that you hear in that one section.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, it's in two sections, because the beginning of it is called Dark Overture, where I just go through everything in a short 2-minute medley. But I think that was the sound of somebody squishing a tomato, and I just mangled the hell out of it.
Oh, okay.
Because I thought maybe it was sound.
I thought maybe it was water, but it isn't. It sounds thicker.
Yeah. No, I didn't play with any blood or anything like that,
People are going to think we're doing all sorts of awful things in the studios.
I know, man. What are those sounds? Blech.
Oh, so yeah, but that's about all. That's really about all that there is to say about Plagues. There's not too much else I can say about how it was created or anything.
Yeah, I'm
hope
definitely.
That people like it.
Yeah, I think they will. I'm going to go ahead and play a couple of the tunes from that. And my husband, Craig, he said that it sounds like music you would hear if you were trick-or-treating and you go up to the porch and they're playing some Halloween music. So it's definitely has that creepy factor to it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yep. Because, I say that because I'll listen to music and he'll often come in and say, "What is that? What is that?" And then when I was listening to Plagues, he was like, "It sounds like some Halloween music when you walk into someone's porch." So, yeah, definitely has that. He had that strange look on his face, like, "What are you listening to?" So, but Rebekkah, what is your newest piece, or what would you like to talk about?
Oh gosh, I actually don't have anything in production right now. The studio's big exciting news is that a compilation that we executive produced last year has been accepted in the New Age category for the Grammys. So that's our big thing. And we're super excited about that. It was this amazing sort of epic compilation. 41 artists in the end got together and created music for it. And Scott, if I remember correctly, you're on there, right? On that list of 41 musicians.
Which compilation is that?
This was Saving Cecil's Pride.
Actually, no, I never did get. I ran out of time before I could submit something for that one.
Yeah, that's right. We talked about it, but you were busy at that time. So that's kind of the big studio news. And I'm not working on anything right now, but I've got a couple of things planned coming up in the next few months. A collaboration with a world music artist that I'm really excited about doing, and right now mostly I'm writing as opposed to doing music or recording, at least in terms of my own personal efforts. I'm working on a novel. I've been writing poetry and short stories and stuff like that. So the whole like music creation thing is a little bit on hold right now, believe it or not.
Wow. But are you doing any live shows right now?
Local only. I do. I sing with a little band here in Southern California every Friday. And we do like it's like, classic rock, all the way up to maybe 90s rock and roll and independent music, that sort of thing. So that's fun, and very much a local thing. It's just loads of fun. We sit and we drink and sing and make crazy music and have a good time together, and that's what we do.
Yeah, that's what it's about.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And I love working with these guys too. They're tremendous musicians. So, when you get together with someone whose work you respect like that, it's beyond exciting. There's something deeply soul satisfying about working with musicians that kind of wake you up like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I really enjoy doing this podcast because I get to talk with so many different people who have the same interest. Mm-hmm. And music is one of those things where you have a strong interest in it, a strong heartfelt pull to do it. And really only other musicians can understand that.
Mm-hmm.
So
mm-hmm. That's right.
Another piece I wanted to talk about was a piece that Scott did with Jack Hertz, and that was the 9 Circles.
Oh yes, 9 Circles, the first album in the
that was
Dante's
great.
trilogy.
It was the first what?
The first album. It's a whole trilogy. It's a 3 CD series, and the last one called Paradiso is actually a double CD.
Oh, okay. And so this is based off of Dante?
Yep. It's based off of Dante's Inferno, okay. Or the whole Divine Comedy.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I tried to read that when I was a senior in college. A senior in high school, and I couldn't read it. I tried.
After we finished the this whole series with Dante, I'm like, hey, let's do the Odyssey, because that's a really cool book that we could work on. He said, yeah, we'll move the studio over to Greece.
Yeah. The Odyssey I was able to read and finish, but not Inferno. I don't know why, but maybe I'll get a good taste of it when I listen to that.
Yeah, that was a pretty fun album to do too, and I think I sent you the final track of that one. You did.
Yeah. I haven't had a chance to listen to all of it yet, just little pieces here and there, but the quality's
still there. It's not very long. Yeah, it's not a very long track. That one track is maybe 5 or 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, I just skimmed it, but now that I'm talking about it here, I'll be listening to the full thing because I'm going to go ahead and play it.
We did another collaboration called Into the Eternal Darkness, where the titles also came from Dante's Inferno. And my daughter Leah, she's actually in that one. I think she was 3 at the time, and that was our first collaboration back in 2013. But yeah, the Dante, the Divine Comedy series is done pretty well on the Oral Films label. It's gotten a lot of downloads, and it looks like a lot of people have purchased it from what I've been able to tell from looking at the website and everything.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It's a really great collection, but it is quite dark. It's definitely not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, it's darker. Out of all 3 of them, well, the Paradiso is obviously that's the more lighter, the one, and the 7 Terraces is pretty well. It's lighter because as it goes on, it gets lighter because it goes from hell to heaven. So the darkest of the 3 is the Inferno. That was also the one that was the most fun to do.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Rebekkah, when I was looking on your Bandcamp, I noticed that I think all of the albums there, but I could be wrong, it seems like they're all collaborations. Do you have any solo work?
That is a good question. Most of the stuff I posted there was collaborations. It's true. The only one that is, let's see, the only one that you would really consider a solo work would be the Rachel Rising one that is the classical version. I don't know which one you're looking at. Are you looking at the Rebekkah Hilgraves.bandcamp?
Yes.
Yeah. So the Rachel Rising Live 2013 one, that one is actually me pretending to be a soloist.
Okay.
Where I wrote the poetry and then commissioned a song cycle to set the poetry to music. And so a former college classmate of mine and I collaborated on that one. He conducted, I sang, and then we had a little chamber orchestra of about 8 musicians. Eight musicians. And that's kind of a dark piece also, come to think of it. But it's definitely more in the classical realm.
Okay. So in that live recording, you're speaking the poetry and then you're also singing soprano?
Mostly singing in that case.
Oh, okay.
There's actually only one that I read, and the rest are sung.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'm looking forward to listening to that.
Oh, thank you. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm sure I will. I used to wish that I were a soprano, but I've accepted myself for who I am.
Yes. Well, it sounds like you're doing interesting things anyway, so, we all got something, right?
Yeah. So, Rebekkah, where can people go to listen to your music and to purchase your music?
A couple different places. The studio is at radhouse.us. It's radhaus.us. And I have a couple of different websites, one for the voiceover stuff. You found the Bandcamp one, which is RebekkahHilgraves.bandcamp.com. I spell it a little oddly. It's RebekkahHilgraves. So my Bandcamp page is probably the most complete for the kinds of works that we're talking about here. And I don't have a lot of other recordings. The most of the other stuff that we've done has been through Radhouse or the stuff that I did for At Water's Edge. If people want to go back and listen to this old At Water's Edge shows, that's mostly just me yakking about ambient music. So that's probably not as interesting.
Well,
you interviewed Steve Roach on one of those shows.
I did. I interviewed Steve Roach. I got to interview Robert Rich. I got to interview Paul Avurinos. I have actually had the privilege of interviewing a few really interesting people for the program over the 4 years that I was on there. The Steve Roach interview isn't available any longer, unfortunately, because he had asked that was the live concert that I recorded here in downtown LA a couple of years ago, 3 years ago now, hard to believe. And because he actually ended up releasing that as a CD, we were not able to broadcast the podcast on the At Water's Edge station. But that was a fun one. That turned into an album release that he did called Into the Vortex, which was this whole long-form ambient in only the way that Steve Roach can do ambient, which has a lot of like didgeridoo and tribal drums and Byron Metcalf's frame drums and stuff like that. And that was just a ton of fun. And the experience that we recorded, the CD is nothing like what it was live. And I mean, that's kind of obvious. It never is. But in this case, what they did was, it's a geodesic dome in downtown LA. So they had a visual artist who was projecting images against the inside of the dome, and people sat inside and looked up. And then they had music that was set up in such a way that they were immersed in both the music and the visual effects. So it was this really, really intense sort of sensory experience. And the CD captures a little bit of that. The music is just great. I mean, I love Roach's music. And then you get a little sense of what it must have been like, because he includes some photographs, some images of the immersion experience. But that was a great project. So so I got to interview Steve Roach. I've gotten to interview Robert Rich. Who else? The story of how it started was I got to interview John Cage years ago and Robert Moog. And,
wow.
John Cage kind of turned me on to the whole idea of music. He's quoted in music music theory books, like Music Theory 101 books, as saying, music is that which we are directed to experience as music. And so when I interviewed him, I got to ask him about that. You know, what do you mean? And of course, I was a young snot-nose. I was in my 20s at the time. It was really funny. But he walked me through it. He was really great. It was a phone interview. He was in New York City. And he described to me how, the sounds around us make music that we're just not even aware of until we start paying attention to it. I mean, this is sort of the definition of ambient music, right? So he held his phone out the window and told me to listen for the music. And so I started hearing taxi horns and garbage trucks and people walking and yelling and, the sounds of a very, very, very busy metropolitan center. And I started to understand, but of course I'm in my early 20s, right? I thought, no, it's not music. It's not beautiful. It's not listenable. Blah, blah, blah. And it took me years, decades even, to understand what he was talking about. And then finally I was back in New York City myself many years later. And I finally understood what he was talking about. I was walking down the street one day and I heard the rumble of machinery. I heard sort of a rhythmic contraption of some sort making noise nearby. I heard the taxi horns. I heard people walking, and they were all their own rhythms, but somehow they made music together. And I finally began to understand what he was talking about with making music out of anything around us. And this is basically how music began, right? We're beating on a hollow tree log or a rock or something like that, and emulating our own heartbeats and emulating the sound of birds singing and elephants walking and things like that. And so it's all music now for me.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, John Cage was definitely ahead of his time, that's for sure.
He really was. He really was.
Yeah. Scott, have you ever been inside one of those domes?
Nope.
I think you would really enjoy that. If there is one nearby your town or anywhere, I would definitely go into one of those and listen to the reverb in there. I have only been in a small one that was maybe 30 by 30 feet or something. It was rather small, but the sound in there is, it's so odd. Like you move your mouth and you can hear the reverb from just your mouth moving. It's
intense. It's
really, really beautiful and really intense. And if you can find some kind of a dome, do they call them geodesic domes? Or like the one I was in was made out of some kind of a adobe, and so all the walls
interesting.
were smooth on the inside, and the only things they had inside were just a couple of pillows on the floor. It was like a little meditation room where
Is that Roach's time room space? That sounds like
I don't
something
know.
Roach would come up with.
I don't know, but
Yeah,
it's,
no, the Geodesic Dome really was a geodesic dome. It was like canvas stretched over frames. But yeah, the acoustic is still that's kind of bizarre. It's it's both dead and incredibly responsive at the same time. You don't get a lot of that slap back, but you can hear everything. Oh, it's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you would really enjoy that, Scott. You should do a concert in one.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, or do a concert or do some stuff in caves like Lee Allen Shoemaker, the tunnel
Yes.
singer.
Right.
Yeah. Caves.
Caves
Oh.
and tunnels.
Caves, tunnels, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
tunnels too. Yeah.
Now, I remember Cindy was talking to me once, and she said that she thought it would be cool, if we went through the redwood forest. And I thought about it, and I was like, I wonder what kind of a sound that would be. Because all those big trees and everything, I wonder what sort of an acoustic experience that would be going through, like, the redwood forest. Well, that's out in California. I don't remember where.
It's in Northern California, yeah, on the border between California and Oregon.
Oh, okay. So that would probably be an interesting experience.
Yeah, it's amazing. The sound it's blissfully quiet. It's really a beautiful thing. Yeah.
Yeah. If you can get into a little area that's away from the freeways and stuff like that, because in Northern California, some areas can be rather busy, even though they're right next to the forest.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I live here in Lake Tahoe, and it's almost towards the redwoods, but not quite. And there are a couple here and there, a couple of redwoods here and there that people have in their yards. But the forests, I've felt like calling out and making noise just to hear the reverberations back. And I get a little bit scared because I think that there are maybe some kind of animals or something that are going to come out and say, what's that?
They're more likely running like hell from you.
Yeah, I don't know. It just seems really too quiet and too, I don't know. I just don't feel like calling out any, forest giants like Sasquatch or Bigfoot and stuff like that. I don't want them to come out.
Funny. My friends, unfortunately, I have to go.
Okay.
I forgot that I had scheduled a pickup this evening, so I need to run. Do you have any more questions for me before I go?
No, that was it. Actually, we were at the end of the podcast. I was just about to ask Scott where we can find his stuff. So I can let you go now, and then I'll just go ahead and ask Scott.
I'm going to go ahead and jump off.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the invitation, and I look forward to doing this again sometime. And I look forward to making music with Scott again sometime.
It was really good to talk to you, too.
Likewise. Thank you.
All right. Have a great evening, Rebekkah.
Thanks, Clara. You too.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
So, Scott, where can people go to listen to and to get your music?
They can go to scottlawlor.bandcamp.com, and I have all my music up there. Well, most of it's up there, not all of it, but a lot of it is. There's some stuff that's on Oral Films and Oral Ghosts and other places. But I'm trying to migrate everything over to my Bandcamp just so that it's all in one place. So I'll probably eventually get all the stuff from other labels up there as well, just so that everything's in one location.
Okay. So I will definitely add in your link and also Rebekkah's link into the show notes so everyone can get on there and get some really good Halloween creepy music to listen to.